Ladies and gentlemen, certainly, here's an intro to your motivational speech in the style of Shi Heng Yi, calm, wise, rooted in ancient philosophy, yet deeply relatable to modern struggles. Shi Heng Yi's style intro for You Cannot Escape Yourself. Here is finally find peace. There comes a time in every life when the noise outside becomes unbearable. We run from discomfort. We seek escape in distraction. But no matter how far we run, there is one truth we cannot outrun. Ourselves, the thoughts, the emotions, the past, they follow like a shadow, never leaving, and the more we avoid them, the more power they gain. Today I invite you to stop running, to sit still, to return to the one place you feared the most within, because peace is not found in distance, nor silence, nor isolation. Peace is what rises when the war within is no longer fought, when you turn toward your own being, not with judgment, but with awareness. Let us begin this journey together, not forward, not outward, but inward, because the final freedom is not in escape, it is in understanding. In today's fast-paced world, the instinct to escape is stronger than ever. We are constantly presented with ways to avoid our discomfort, through technology, through entertainment, through endless distractions. When life becomes overwhelming, when thoughts grow heavy, when emotions rise beyond what we can handle, the most common response is to run. Run into noise, into busyness, into anything that takes us away from ourselves. But what most fail to realize is that no matter where you go, no matter what you try to drown yourself in, there is one thing that always follows: yourself. The mind, the emotions, the unresolved pain, the questions you keep pushing down. They don't disappear just because you've changed location or shifted your focus. They remain, quietly growing stronger in the background. This habit of escaping becomes a cycle. You feel uneasy, so you avoid, but the act of avoidance doesn't solve anything. It simply delays it, and with each delay, the unease builds. What began as a whisper in your mind becomes a storm, simply because it was ignored. There's a saying, what you resist persists, and nowhere is that more evident than in our relationship with ourselves. The more you resist sitting with your thoughts, the more power they gain. The more you avoid feeling your emotions, the more chaotic they become when they finally erupt. You can change your environment 1,000 times, but if the same unresolved parts of you are carried within, peace will never be found. Running may bring temporary relief, but it always creates a deeper problem. It teaches the mind that discomfort is dangerous, that it must be avoided at all costs. It trains your nervous system to panic at the first sign of inner unrest. Over time, you become a prisoner, not of the world around you, but of your own avoidance. You lose the ability to be still, to reflect, to face what's within, and the cost of that is heavy, because until you face yourself fully, you can never truly be free. You will always be one step behind your own shadow, chased by your own mind. Facing yourself doesn't mean you need to have all the answers. It doesn't mean you need to fix everything right away. It simply means having the courage to stop running, to be present with what is, to observe your thoughts instead of fleeing from them, to feel your emotions instead of suppressing them. In that stillness, something shifts. The mind begins to soften. The body begins to relax. What once felt unbearable starts to feel manageable, not because it's gone, but because you've changed the way you relate to it. True strength is not in how far you can run from your problems, but in how bravely you can sit with them. It's in your ability to look in the mirror, to face your own reflection without flinching, without judgment. When you stop running, you begin to see clearly. You begin to understand the patterns, the stories, the wounds that have shaped your responses, and with that awareness comes the possibility of transformation. Not through force, but through presence, not through escape, but through integration. To be human is to feel deeply, to struggle, to carry both light and darkness within. Escaping yourself is denying that truth. It's pretending that the discomfort isn't part of the journey, but in truth, the discomfort is the doorway. It is the signal that something inside is ready to be acknowledged. It is not your enemy, it is your guide. The act of facing yourself is not a punishment, it is a return to what is real, what is raw, what is true. It's in that return that healing begins. True peace begins with radical self-acceptance, because without it, the inner conflict never ends. We live in a world that constantly tells us who we should be, how we should feel, what we should look like, and what kind of life we should be living. From a young age, we begin to shape our identity around external standards and expectations. We start comparing ourselves, editing parts of who we are just to feel accepted, just to feel good enough. But with every mask we put on, with every truth we hide, a part of us disconnects from our authentic self. Over time, this leads to a deep internal divide. The version of us we show to the world, and the version of us we silence within. This inner split becomes the root of so much suffering. The parts of you that feel insecure, angry, ashamed, or afraid, those are the parts most people try to reject. We're told to be positive, to be strong, to keep it together. So instead of honoring our truth, we suppress it. We pretend to be okay. We fight against our own emotions. But that fight creates tension. The more you reject who you are, the more inner resistance builds, and the more resistance there is, the further peace drifts from your reach. You cannot be at peace while being at war with yourself. Radical self-acceptance means embracing every part of your being, not just the polished, presentable parts, but also the raw, uncomfortable, messy ones. It means no longer seeing your flaws as something to fix, but as something to understand. It means looking at your wounds with compassion, not judgment. It means choosing to believe that your worth is not conditional. It's not based on what you achieve, how you look, or how others perceive you. It's based on your very existence. You are enough simply because you are. This level of acceptance is not passive or lazy. It doesn't mean you stop growing or evolving. In fact, the opposite is true. True growth comes from a place of self-love, not self-hate. When you accept yourself fully, you create a stable inner foundation. You stop wasting energy on shame and self-criticism, and instead use that energy to understand yourself more deeply. From that understanding, change becomes natural. It flows not from pressure, but from alignment. Most people fear acceptance because they think it means settling. But radical self-acceptance isn't about settling. It's about acknowledging reality without resistance. It's about saying, this is where I am, this is who I am right now, and that's okay. From that place, you are free to grow, not because you're trying to escape who you are, but because you genuinely care for yourself. There's a difference between changing because you think you're broken and changing because you want to live more fully. Peace begins when you stop trying to become someone else and start returning to who you've always been beneath the layers. It begins when you no longer feel the need to apologize for your feelings, your past, your imperfections. It begins when you stop labeling your emotions as good or bad and start seeing them as messengers. When you accept yourself, you become your own safe space, the mind calms down, the body feels grounded, you no longer need to seek approval or validation because you've already given it to yourself. Acceptance allows you to meet your present moment with openness. It removes the constant pressure to be somewhere else, to be someone else. It creates inner stillness, the kind of stillness that is not empty, but full of clarity. In that stillness, you no longer react from fear or insecurity. You respond from wisdom, from self-respect, from inner peace, and that is where true freedom begins. Silence is not empty, it's full of the answers you seek. In a world that thrives on noise, movement, and constant stimulation, silence has become something most people fear. We are conditioned to fill every quiet moment with distractions, scrolling, talking, working, watching, planning. But beneath all of that noise lies a space that holds more truth than any external source ever could. Silence, when truly embraced, is not a void, it is a mirror. It reflects back everything we need to know about ourselves, our patterns, our pain, our purpose. When you sit in silence, the mind begins to reveal what has been buried under the surface. The thoughts that arise may seem random at first, but they are not meaningless. They are signals pointing to areas of your life that require attention. In silence, your emotional state becomes clearer. You start to notice the tension in your body, the pace of your breathing, the stories you've been silently repeating to yourself. You begin to feel things more deeply, things you've avoided or numbed for years. And though that may feel uncomfortable at first, it's through that discomfort that clarity is born. Most people associate silence with loneliness or emptiness because they've never learned how to be with themselves. But being alone is not the same as being lonely. Loneliness arises when you are disconnected from yourself, when you don't feel safe in your own presence. Silence is the path back to that connection. It teaches you how to listen, not just to what's going on around you, but to what's happening within you. It allows you to observe your own thoughts without getting caught in them. It gives space for insight, for creativity, for wisdom that cannot be accessed through constant doing. The greatest realizations in life don't come from external noise, they come from internal stillness. When the mind quiets down, a deeper intelligence emerges. You begin to see things from a higher perspective. You start recognizing the patterns in your behavior, the source of your fears, the truth behind your desires, and once you see those things clearly, change becomes possible. You're no longer acting out of habit or emotion, you're acting from awareness. And awareness is the beginning of transformation. In silence, you meet your true self, not the version shaped by roles, labels, or expectations, but the self that exists beyond all of that, the self that is whole, grounded, and aware. That self doesn't need approval, it doesn't seek validation, it simply is, and the more time you spend in silence, the more familiar you become with that self. Over time, that familiarity turns into trust. You begin to trust your intuition. You start making decisions that feel aligned instead of pressured. You no longer chase answers outside yourself because you realize they were within you all along. Silence also brings healing. Many wounds linger not because they are too deep, but because they are never given the space to surface. When you enter silence without resistance, you allow those wounds to breathe. You allow the emotions attached to them to rise and move through you. You learn how to sit with sadness without being overwhelmed, how to witness anger without acting on it, how to honor grief without being consumed by it. This process is not dramatic or loud, it's subtle, gentle, but its impact is powerful. Peace is not the absence of thought, it is the space between thoughts. That space can only be found through stillness, through quiet, through listening. It's not something you have to create, it's already there, underneath the layers of noise and distraction. The more comfortable you become with silence, the less dependent you become on external things to feel okay. You begin to carry a quiet confidence within you, a calm that cannot be shaken by circumstances, a wisdom that guides you through life with grace. Freedom is not found in escape, but in self-awareness. Many people spend their entire lives searching for freedom outside of themselves. They believe that if they can change their environment, their job, their relationship, or even their identity, they will finally feel free. But no matter how many changes are made on the outside, the sense of restriction often remains on the inside. This is because true freedom does not come from changing your surroundings. It comes from understanding your inner world. It is not about avoiding pain, but about recognizing the source of that pain. It is not about running from fear, but about becoming aware of what lies beneath it. Self-awareness is the key to unlocking inner freedom because it allows you to see yourself clearly. It creates a space between stimulus and response. Instead of reacting automatically out of habit or emotion, you gain the ability to pause, to reflect, and to choose. In that space of conscious choice lies your power. It's the difference between being controlled by your mind and becoming the master of it. When you are aware of your thoughts, you are no longer a prisoner of them. You begin to see the narratives you've been living by, the beliefs you've accepted without question, the patterns you repeat unconsciously. Without self-awareness, even the most ideal circumstances can feel suffocating. You can be in a beautiful place, surrounded by people who love you, and still feel trapped. This is because the real prison is not made of walls. It's made of mental patterns, unresolved emotions, and unexamined fears. But when you start observing yourself, when you begin to ask deeper questions and look honestly at your inner landscape, you break free from those invisible chains. You start to realize that most of your suffering doesn't come from reality. It comes from the way you interpret and respond to it. Self-awareness is not about judging yourself or labeling everything you think and feel. It's about becoming a witness. It's about noticing what arises in you with curiosity and compassion. You begin to understand your triggers, your coping mechanisms, and the root of your behaviors. And through that understanding, transformation begins. Because you cannot change what you are not aware of, but once you see it, you have the power to choose differently. When you are self-aware, you become less reactive and more intentional. You stop blaming others for your emotions and start taking responsibility for your inner state. You recognize that peace is not something anyone else can give you or take from you. It's something you cultivate from within. The more aware you become, the less you need to escape. Because the moment you stop resisting what's inside of you, you stop fearing it. And when there is no fear, there is no need to run. This kind of freedom is subtle but profound. It's not the kind of freedom advertised in the world. It doesn't always look glamorous or exciting. It looks like stillness in chaos, clarity in confusion, strength in vulnerability. It allows you to be fully present with life as it is, not as you wish it to be. It gives you the ability to hold both joy and pain without being defined by either. You are no longer at the mercy of external events because your sense of self is rooted in awareness, not in circumstances. Self-awareness also deepens your connection with others. When you understand yourself, you begin to understand people with more empathy and less judgment. Your relationships improve because you are no longer projecting your inner wounds onto others. You communicate with honesty, listen with presence, and respond with integrity. You show up as your authentic self, not out of a need for approval, but out of a commitment to truth. The journey of self-awareness is not always easy, but it is always worth it. It requires courage to look within, to face what you find there, and to meet it with honesty. But with every moment of awareness, you reclaim a piece of your freedom. You stop running, stop hiding, and start living with your eyes open, your heart awake, and your spirit unburdened. Healing starts when you stop resisting who you are. The human experience is filled with complexity, joy and sorrow, confidence and doubt, strength and vulnerability. But somewhere along the journey, we're taught to only embrace half of that experience. We're told that certain emotions are wrong, that certain traits are weaknesses, that we must always strive to be better, different, more. As a result, many people walk through life with a quiet war happening inside. They deny their feelings, suppress their wounds, and hide the parts of themselves they believe are unworthy. This resistance to what is true within creates a deep sense of disconnection, and where there is disconnection, there is suffering. Resisting who you are doesn't change your truth. It only pushes it further beneath the surface. It doesn't heal your wounds. It hides them behind layers of shame and silence. You may pretend to be fine, convince others that you're okay, even fool yourself at times. But the parts of you that are hurting don't vanish just because you refuse to look at them. They wait. They express themselves in subtle ways, through anxiety, through fatigue, through anger, through avoidance. And the longer you resist, the louder those signals become. Healing is not about becoming someone else. It's not about fixing yourself because you believe you are broken. It's about returning to the parts of you that you've abandoned. It's about allowing yourself to feel what you've been too afraid to feel, to say what you've been too afraid to say, to be who you've been too afraid to be. It begins the moment you stop fighting your own nature and start listening to it instead. It begins when you allow yourself to be fully human, not perfect, not polished, just real. When you stop resisting who you are, you begin to move through life with honesty. You recognize your emotions without needing to change them. You allow sadness without calling it weakness. You accept anger without labeling it wrong. You acknowledge fear without letting it control you. And in doing so, you create space for those emotions to move through you. They no longer get stuck or stored within your body. They are felt, expressed, and released. That is the process of healing, not erasing pain, but learning how to move with it, how to honor it, how to grow from it. Acceptance is the doorway to wholeness. When you stop rejecting parts of yourself, you begin to integrate. The child in you who felt neglected, the teenager who was misunderstood, the adult who felt lost, they all deserve your compassion. They don't need to be silenced, they need to be seen. Healing happens when you choose to become your own ally instead of your own enemy, when you offer yourself the same kindness and understanding that you offer to others. When you stop trying to meet an image of who you think you should be and start embracing who you actually are. This journey of healing is not linear. It's not a straight path or a fixed destination. It's a process of remembering, feeling, releasing, and beginning again. Some days will be heavy, others light. Some moments will be filled with clarity, others with confusion. But when you stop resisting, you begin to trust the flow. You stop needing certainty in every step and start finding safety in your presence. You realize that healing is not about being healed. It's about being in relationship with yourself in a way that is honest, tender, and patient. There is no part of you that is unworthy of love, no experience that disqualifies you from peace, no emotion that makes you less spiritual, less strong, or less deserving. The more you allow yourself to be seen by your own awareness, the more you reconnect with your essence. And that essence is not damaged, it's simply waiting to be acknowledged. When you stop resisting, the armor begins to fall away. You no longer need to defend, to pretend, or to perform. You can breathe. You can rest, you can be, and in that space of being, healing naturally begins to unfold.